Oh. All right. Hello, everyone. Let me go ahead and set things up. And when somebody arrives, can you let me know how the sound is? Okay. Hello. How was the sound, Victoria? It's fine here. Yeah. Well, hey, Nathan. All good? Perfect. All right. Seems like we're ready to get started then. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be finding our coffees for the August 2025 Coffee of the Month. So as always, I have a list of themes, roasters, and coffees that were suggested to us on our Instagram. If you guys have any suggestions or recommendations, then go ahead and let us know. We will take a look at all of them on stream. In the meanwhile, I am going to be drinking the Mojito, the wash processed Kenya from Say that was released somewhat recently. That's been actually heavily discussed. So cheers to that. And I did have it at a local coffee shop. They batch brewed it for me and it was nice. I think that it's been just a slight bit overhyped, but I wanted to brew it for myself and see if it was even better when I brewed it personally. So before we get started, I will go ahead and share that coffee. So let me share the screen here real quick. What have been people saying on Mojito? They've been extremely positive from what I've heard. They seem to think it's one of the best Kenyans has released from what I've seen so far. Okay, perfect. I think we're good to get started. Let me make sure that it didn't stop already. Oh, perfect. Let me go ahead and pull up Mojito real quick. My S key on my keyboard is not working very well, which is going to make this a little tricky, but we'll see how that goes. I accidentally dropped my computer from just a slight distance, and as a result, my S key has stopped working very well. Is this the mojito that they've had this year? I'm pretty sure it is. It's actually been a pretty nice coffee based off the first sip. But as mentioned, I thought it was nice. I didn't think it was as good as a lot of people were saying, but even then, still a pretty nice coffee all around. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We will go into the first suggestion. And right off the bat, I don't have a good idea for a theme yet. A lot of the suggestions were a little bit all over the board, so I will definitely need some help narrowing it down as to what we're going to do. But the very first suggestion came from Sean OGI, and they suggested Mehar Coffee. So let's go ahead and take a look at Mehar real quick. I just finished last week and thought it was very herbal. That's interesting, James. I wouldn't necessarily say that this coffee is particularly herbal for me yet. I can kind of see it. If you were working through this coffee throughout the entirety of it, then you probably have a better idea of it than I do. As mentioned, this is only going to be the second experience I'm going to have of this coffee. It tastes like a slightly sweeter Kenyan, which is a win for me. That's all I really look for in most Kenyans these days. All right, Nathan, theme Best of Panama. I would love to do that theme, honestly. I don't think anybody would be really surprised if I just purchased a bunch of really high-end Panamanian geishas, but I wonder how many people could afford something like that if we made it our Coffee of the Month theme. Michael says you answered the question as I hit send. It's got a nice slime up front, but more red fruit. I can see the herbal. Yeah, I can see all of that too. It does have plenty of that citric quality to it, but it's nice and sweet. So that's a win for me. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at Mirror real quick. Oh yeah, forgot that my computer is Google Bing or Microsoft Bing on there. All right, Mirror Coffee. And I should say real quick, it's not going to be one of our nominees, largely because I actually purchased a couple of coffees from Mira real quick. I just wanted to go through them and show you which coffees I did purchase. The Paulo Trujillo was one, and the main reason I purchased this coffee was because it got us to the minimum for free shipping. But the coffee that I was actually more interested in purchasing was, if this is the natural, this is the wash. They had a natural Ethiopian coffee, which it looks like they're sold out of now. That's the coffee I originally wanted to get, but the coffee that caught my interest the most is this one right here, and I think a lot of you guys might find this to be a pretty interesting coffee. It is a washed SL28 Panamanian coffee, and you guys know how much I love my non-Panamanian Gesha varietals, like this one right here. So this was such a wonderful sounding coffee, and we went ahead and purchased it. So you can kind of see the description right here. I have seen very few Panamanian SL28 coffees ever. So this one being one that was easily accessible, we went ahead and purchased it. So Miro will be a coffee roaster that we're reviewing for the very first time. This Panamanian coffee as well as this Palo Trujillo right here. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the second suggestion. We did get quite a few suggestions as well, so might be a bit. And Sean also suggested Hex. So let's go ahead and take a look at Hex. And I feel like a lot of people have more recently discovered Hex. We talk about Hex somewhat regularly on these streams, largely because they seem to be a good coffee roaster that has a lot of offerings that would fit our themes. So right now we got a pink bourbon coffee. We got a Wilton Benitez thermal shock coffee. I was kind of curious about this one because I don't know if this is a true Tipica. I know that the Pilcocaja coffees can be Tipica coffees too. We had one from Memley a very long time ago, but I do wonder if that's a Mejorado, as we reviewed a Mejorado from, well, we have a review from Thankfully Coffee of the Pilcocaja Mejorado coming up here soon. But then they have a natural, and we have another natural coffee. And then this is the one that they're referring to, this Pacamara Tanzanian coffee. I think early on, this could be something that we would just need to find a theme around, but it's an interesting sounding coffee, largely because I love reviewing Tanzanian coffees, and there aren't a lot of Tanzanian coffees that are readily accessible or available to review. So I'm going to go ahead and write this one down. We just need a theme around it. All right. What's the roast level looking like on Mira? I don't know yet. It hasn't arrived. It's supposed to arrive soon, and at that time, I'll probably have a pretty good idea of the profile of their coffees. I think that they describe their coffees as supposed to be on a Nordic scale, so we'll see. Just kind of curious how that might turn out. I've heard slightly more positive things than I've heard negative things about them, so I think that there's a lot of optimism that their coffees might be nice, but I have never had anything from them before. Let's see here. Michael says last year's Janja from them was really nice. Was disappointed by both Chem Bindis from them recently, but overall limited success with Marab. So that's good information. I appreciate that, Michael. And also had a Wilton recently on accident. Ordered it at a shop and turned the jar as soon as I tapped my card and was screaming inside. Yeah, that's my nightmare right there. Accidentally ordering a Wilton coffee that I did not want, but you know, I get a lot of coffees that I don't want at times. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And MZNYC3 suggested surprise co-ferment blind. So I assume that they mean a co-ferment blind taste test rankings video. And that sounds like another nightmare right there. But why don't we take a look at coffee roasters that absolutely love having co-fermented coffees? And let's see if my S key will work. There we go. S&W loves their co-fermented coffees. And I feel like they usually put it on their other tab, their like limiteds, unless they've recently changed their website. Yeah, roaster select. There we go. See, yeah, there we go. We have our watermelon co-ferment. It's just, we'll say, unfortunately sold out. Banana honey process. I don't know if that technically qualifies under the co-ferment category. That sounds like a coffee, I suppose. Banana, potentially a banana co-ferment. All right. What else we got? Castillo, and I like how it has to be put on here that it's a non-co-ferment, and then a peach honey processed coffee. So yeah, it looks like, is this another co-ferment coffee that we have from S&W? I will still say I've never had a co-ferment that I've ever liked. Now, some of the, I don't know how you want to identify them, infused coffees I've had turned out okay, but I've never had a true co-ferment that I've thought was really nice. All right, who else is a coffee roaster that has a lot of co-ferment? I think Black and White does. Now, has anybody had Black and White since they were acquired? Because I wasn't the biggest fan of Black and White before they were acquired. I still thought their washed coffees were decent whenever they did have washed coffees, but I'm kind of wondering if their coffee has changed since they were recently acquired. I feel like I'm kind of missing out on. Yeah, here we go. We got a passion fruit co-ferment and oak barrel anaerobic processed coffee. Man, the things that people do with coffees these days. What is everyone else drinking, by the way? I'm kind of curious to know what you guys might be drinking this morning. I'm happy with this Kenya. For a Kenya, it's a win for me. All right. Maybe one day we'll do a co-ferment blind taste test rankings video. I think I would just need a lot of co-ferments from coffee roasters that I like, different coffee roasters that I like that offer them. I really don't know one on that, but let's go ahead and move on for now. And Sai Choriver suggested the Rogue Wave Tagel Alemehu Umbella Natural. So why don't we take a look at that one real quick? I feel like we get a lot of suggestions for Rogue Wave, and we have not reviewed Rogue Wave in, I want to say, 3+ years or so. It's been a very long time, actually. Brandywine has a number of co-ferment offerings last time I checked. That makes sense. I completely forgot about Brandywine. After we're done looking at Rogue Wave, we'll take a look at Brandywine and see about their potential co-ferments. But yeah, Rogue Wave right here. And what I do like about Rogue Wave is they oftentimes have at least one or so coffee that I'm interested in. So here we have a Panamanian TBK. I just wish it was washed. That's one of the coffees that we did review from Rogue Wave in the past, was a washed Panamanian non-Gesher coffee. I wonder what the varietal is of this coffee. I'm getting slightly sidetracked here, but this might fit with another theme of ours. Yeah, looks like some sort of mix, including Catamore. That's kind of what I figured, but I just wanted to double check. And this is the coffee that they were referencing. Again, it's tricky. I don't really have a good idea or theme on how to make the two coffees that we've looked at work so far. I really do not like Rogue Wave's website, or at least the notification of the shopping. But yeah, it sounds like a nice coffee. I've heard a lot of positive things about this producer's coffee this year. I think the main thing I want to see is if there's anything else that's really interesting from this coffee roaster right now. Gideon says a friend brought some glitch coffee back from Japan, drinking carbonic macerated natural Ethiopia. Funk level is 100. Yeah, that sounds about right. Carbonic macerated natural Ethiopia. You know, the one that we reviewed recently wasn't the worst, so there's potential for them to be okay. But yeah, that Tegel is really good. Bought some last month. That's good to know. I think hearing so much positive feedback about this coffee from Rogue Wave might prompt us to make another purchase from them. Natural anaerobic Bolivian coffee. I think what's been so tricky about this coffee roaster is there's been a little bit of turmoil. Like, I heard that they let their roaster go at one point. The first time we had them, they said that they were kind of tinkering with their roasting too. And since then, we haven't really revisited them. Even when we go to coffee shops in Canada and I see their coffee, I haven't really purchased that many of them. So I probably do need to get a little bit more familiarized with their coffees, especially if they are getting a lot of positive feedback recently. I think the other thing that would probably interest me the most would be this Sudan Rume coffee, because we've been reviewing, well, we're working on quite a few Sudan Rume coffees, and they're kind of interesting, actually. James is drinking the Say Halo Hartume Ethiopia at the moment. Kind of curious about that, James. Is that since Lance has started roasting? I don't know if you know the answer to that question, but I think that was one of the releases they had while they were still utilizing the old roaster, or I guess the old person was still roasting. I would wonder if Poma Denmark grown coffee is good. And Simon, I've been wondering about that too. And that will actually fit into one of our other themes. So we will take a look at that here when we get a chance. So Brandy wine and then that Poma coffee. O'Miller says aviary drops tomorrow morning. Thank you for that heads up. I wonder if I want to purchase it. If I actually do get to it in time. I thought I saw that there were very limited offerings for it, so it might be a coffee that we'd be interested in purchasing. And then Van Nguyen is drinking the X or 43 anaerobic washed Soledad today. So we do have a review on that coffee. What do you think of it too? I said that if we had more of it to work with, I think it could be a really nice coffee. It's probably at its best today. It probably improved quite a bit after we had already posted the review. So we'll keep Rogue Wave in mind. If we can somehow figure a theme out around either Rogue Wave or the coffee that was suggested to us, then we'll put them in there. But let's take a look at the other stuff that was suggested to us real quick. So first we said brandy wine. I do remember we had brandy wine in one of our coffee of the month polls in the past, and I don't think it performed very well. I have not heard anybody say anything about brandy wine in a very long time. Yeah, here we have a peach co-ferment. We can make this work. We have at least 2 co-ferments from 2 different coffee roasters. I think that one not sold out. People love their co-ferments. Is that a decaf co-ferment? And I feel like if I put this in a coffee of the month poll, people would vote for it just so I'd be forced to review it. It doesn't sound terrible, but I've never had a good co-ferment and I've never had a good decaf, so I can't imagine that I would like this coffee. I'll take a look at Poma. Poma would fit another suggestion that was offered to us earlier. I think their coffees are just very expensive or so. I don't mind. It would just be interesting trying to get our hands on their coffee. There we go. Looks like a lot of it's sold out too. I'm kind of glad to see that. I think if enough people try out their coffee, then we might get a good idea of how good their coffee actually is. I've had Maze Labs La Papaya Tipica Mejorado was very tea-like nice. That's good to know, Simon. We do have a number of Maze Labs coffees coming up. What's funny is we placed the order for all of the coffees that they did have on their website through Airworks, and then Airworks mentioned that they were releasing a number of other coffees, so we completely changed up our order. But we do have quite a few coffees from Maze Lab. I'm very excited about those. That Mejorado is definitely one of them. And James is unsure who roasted, but it's roasted well and very good, citrus forward and peachy with tea notes. That's very good. That's what you would hope for from a Halo Hartume coffee. Testing 112 said drinking say end of season wash Columbia through espresso. So good. Which one, if you know off the top of your head? I assume it's probably one of their pink bourbones. They released so many pink bourbones this year, but that's usually the case. Gideon also suggested Father Coffee out of South Africa have some really interesting higher end offerings, including the Finca Hartman Panamanian Gesha. Yeah, let's take a look. I missed my opportunity and window very early on when Airworks brought them on to try out some of their coffee. That's the one we're looking for. Mostly because I think I was slightly talked out of their coffee. It sounded like they weren't going to be my profile. It sounds like that maybe they're a little bit more developed than I would like. Am I looking at the right coffee roaster? I do not think I'm looking at the right one. Unless they changed their bags recently. Yeah, no, that should be the right one. Did they change their bags recently then? No, Paraiso coffee. Yeah, this has to be the right one. I do wonder what the shipping to the United States for a coffee roaster like this would be. They have Zio. And they have the Gesha Zio. I don't even know what the conversion of that is. For a 48-gram jar, $499. And given that their standard coffees are like 217, then I imagine we're probably looking at $50 for a 48-gram jar or so. HJ is drinking, say, Silke, is that correct? Sike Bocosa this morning. And it's always nice to see just how many Say coffees there are out there because, I mean, they release so many throughout the year. I feel like this year's actually been a little lacking in terms of the amount of coffees they've released. I don't know if somebody keeps really close track of how many coffees they're releasing this year, but over the last couple of years, it seems like they've been releasing more than they had this year. So it's nice to see that people have a lot of variety in what they're drinking from Say. And testing 112 says the Jose Martinez Pink Bourbon, such an awesome pretzel-like yeasty flavor with a slightly nutty undertone. Oh, that does sound very interesting, especially for a Pink Bourbon coffee, especially one from Say. A little unique in that sense. If we could find a way to order from Father, then I imagine that obviously that Hartman Coffee is on the list, but I'm trying to think of how we can spin this into our theme too. They do have some interesting higher end offerings though, that's for sure. I've heard that Zio, the Gesha, is supposed to be significantly better than the one that we did review from September. And I know that September also has the Zio Gesha at some point, but I think we got the Pink Bourbon or so. I didn't really understand that coffee, but they can be pretty nice, I imagine. All right, let's go ahead and see what we have next. And it was another Canadian coffee roaster that was suggested to us. It was from the same person, and they suggested Hatch Tegel Lemehu Humbella, so the washed Ethiopia. So let's take a look at it from Hatch. And I'm actually really looking forward to discussing Hatch because Hatch has come up recently as they had released some of the Hatchy coffees, and I had an entire discussion with it with some people in Brian Quans Discord. So we are active in Brian Quans Discord for anybody that's not aware. And it was about those Hatchy coffees largely because I wanted to see what the sentiment on them was. And here we have both the Hatchy coffees, and neither of them are sold out currently. I was not sure whether or not they would actually sell out. But yeah, before we take a look at that coffee, why don't we take a look at these Hatchy coffees real quick? I asked people about this one because it's still hard to find. We got 7 left. Panamanian Hatchy. You can find Colombian Hatchy at quite a few places, but I have not found too many that are actually grown in Panama. And this one right here sounded interesting. I almost purchased it before I consulted some people to see whether or not they had actually tried it. And the consensus was mixed. There were some people that said it was good, it's worth trying, it's worth reviewing, but there were some people that said there are much better Panamanian Hatchy coffees out there. And then they also said that there are much better Colombian Hatchy coffees out there than the ones that Hatch had released. And I do know that September is going to be releasing a Hatchy coffee soon. So if there's a coffee roaster that I do trust to do Hatchy well, then I think it's probably going to be September. We're going to probably get the Colombian Hatchy if we get it in time, but that's who we're looking at Colombian Hatchy for right now. All right, let's take a look at that Ethiopia coffee, though. I was kind of curious about this Morgan Estates, too. I'm getting distracted by their other coffees. They did not have some of these last time I checked on their website. This has to be a Colombian coffee. Rimudamo. Ask. Are they completely sold out at Ethiopia? I think that they are. If I remember correctly, I think we looked at it recently, but it looks like they might be out of it. They have a lot more coffees than what I remember last time I looked at their website, which really wasn't that long ago. Well, that kind of eliminates that. A little unfortunate. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. What do we have next? And we have a suggestion from Mateus127, and they suggested Newberry Street. So let's take a look at them real quick. And Newberry Street is a coffee roaster that has been popping up a lot on, is it Newberry Street? I think I spelled that wrong. There we go. On Brian Quan's Discord quite a bit too, as I think he did a collab with them. He did a collab with them on a coffee that I had zero interest in. So that happened, but we'll see what they are currently offering right now. What I think is a possibility that we could do based off some of the suggestions is maybe coffee roasters that we've never reviewed before, as we've never had anything from Newberry Street. As mentioned, we never had anything from Mira, but since we already ordered some of their coffees, it doesn't make a lot of sense to order more from them as our coffee of the month theme. But Newberry Street's definitely an option. And if we go with that theme, then I would definitely love to hear some other coffee roasters that we haven't featured before that are worth reviewing. Looks like they're sold out of a lot of their current offerings. Diego Bermudez Gesha. Sounds nice. I imagine a lot of you guys might have some familiarity with this coffee roaster. So can you tell me what it's like, profile, your experience with them? This one sounds okay. I am concerned by the lychee note, but the rest of it sounds fine. They seem to lean pretty heavily into the more experimental and processed coffees. So I think if there's one that's maybe the most interesting to me, it's probably that Diego Bermudez Gesha. Raindrop Scooby. Yeah, I'll say on that one. I know people were trying to get me to purchase that coffee too. All right. And you guys can kind of see that this is why I'm undecided on a theme so far, because we've had suggestions of coffee roasters that we've never featured before, and we've had suggestions for coffee roasters that have interesting offerings right now that we have featured before. So still trying to find some middle ground for it right now, but don't necessarily have a good idea yet. We'll move on for right now. And Robert Chai suggested Flower Child has a La Esmeralda Gesha right now. It seems to be up your alley, and it certainly is. Flower Child is interesting to me because it's usually the case where I have one of their coffees that far surpasses my expectation. But on the other end of things, I have coffees that I am a bit more disappointed from them than I would have expected. And I think it is a lot of those. What's the name of the producer that we feature from them a lot? I'm hoping that they have it on here right now. They do not. There's that Ecuadorian producer that we've had so many of their coffees from, and some of the varietals were really impressive, like the Ethiopian landrace, and some of them we've been just a little disappointed with. But right now, they look to have a pretty interesting set of coffees. This Gesha right here, the Victor Pineda Chiroso. This is the coffee that they're mentioning. I know we've had Favre Ninko before, but I think it was the Pink Bourbon coffee. So I don't think we've had the Gesha from them before. And then, of course, the Brian Kwan collab coffee right here, which it sounds nice too. Karamo, I think we've reviewed that one before. I think it was one of the first coffees we ever reviewed from them. But yeah, this is La Esmeralda. Someone else reached out to me about this coffee saying that they had ordered it too. So it, obviously, if I had an opportunity to pick up this coffee and just try it out, I would love to just try it first before purchasing it. It is a little expensive, $75 for 125 grams. It sounds very nice. Sounds exactly like what I would look for in this sort of coffee. I don't know how this particular Esmeralda has performed this year, but I mean, it's a lovely sounding coffee. I'm kind of curious, would you guys be interested in us doing a very high-end coffee of the month theme? Because it might price a lot of people out of purchasing the coffee, because I imagine $75 for 125 grams is too expensive for a lot of people. I've heard that sometimes when we pick higher end offerings, it's just too expensive for others. All right. Drinking last of my TPC La Noria, maybe you're reviewing it. Yes, the review is coming up on Tuesday, so definitely stay tuned for that. Nicholas, hey Julian, what are you thinking for the coffee of the month? So that's what I was mentioning, Nicholas, and I think it might be worth pinning or posting something like that. But right now, I have not decided on a theme yet. The themes I'm kind of floating around with are maybe coffee roasters that we've never reviewed before, because we did have a couple of suggestions for that. We do have some other theme ideas, but we just kind of need to find coffees that align with those themes. We're trying to maybe fit in the Tanzanian Pacamara from Hex, and also the Kenyan or the Ethiopian coffee from Rogue Wave 2, but I haven't really come up with a way to fit those into the theme. I have Esme and the Brian Kwan coffee ordered. That's awesome. I wonder how quickly this coffee will sell out, because I do imagine that I can probably wait on it to hear for feedback from others about how good this Esmeralda is. All right. And scoutrush.com said, I'm down to one washed Ethiopian coffee in the kitchen and waiting for a bunch of fancy orders. Not quite a great feeling. It feels really bad too on this end when I know that I have an Airworks order that I need to meet up with Airworks to pick up, because usually when I meet up with him, I have like 10, 11, maybe 12 coffees or so that it's worth picking up. And starting to review, and I can see my collection dwindling down. And since I know that I usually have to go through 6 or 7 coffees, it's really not a good feeling. So I'm with you right there. And then let's see here. Simon says, have you seen Best of Panama La Esmeralda auction coffee? Had some scores of 87 points, and there was a coffee that was 30 KUSD per 1 kilogram. I was paying very close attention. I have always been that weird person that follows the Best of Panama auction. I don't think that will come as a huge surprise to many, given that Panamanian coffees are my favorite coffees. What's funny is I actually used to make coworkers watch the auction with me, which they thought was weird. But yes, I was paying very close attention to that. I saw that 98 point Esmeralda coffee, which is insane. I hope that there is a coffee roaster that I do trust that will be carrying that coffee. I still remember it was just a couple of years ago that the Finca Armoire from Appleton's Gold came out, and I was super excited to finally get my hands on that one. Scored, what was it, a 94.5? Beautiful, or maybe it was higher than that. Beautiful, beautiful coffee. So those coffees are capable of being absolutely tremendous, and I would love to get my hands on that 98-point coffee. Would definitely love to review it. I heard Little Bear Coffee from Albuquerque, New Mexico has some decent offerings. Never tried them before. Well, that would fit in with the theme, so we can take a very quick look at them. I've also never heard of them. Little Bear Coffee. I've heard of no New Mexican-based coffee roasters, to be completely honest. I've been in New Mexico on a number of occasions, and I've never known where to get coffee from. All right, let's see what we've got. They've got the kind of old school bags. We do have a Bali coffee. That in itself is unique. I can certainly write them down at the very least, given that they would fit in with a theme of coffee roasters that we've never reviewed before, if that's the theme we decide to go with. And I think I'd stick to this Bali coffee. It's a pretty safe offering too, given that it's washed. Also got some unique varietals on there. Also a horchata note. Who doesn't love horchata? All right, so let's go ahead and move on for right now. And Hiking RMNP suggested specialty instant coffees. And that's not necessarily the worst idea out there. I don't know if you guys would be interested in seeing us review specialty instant coffees, but some of you might remember from a while ago that there was a business called Voila Coffee, and I think that they're completely, well, I know that they're completely gone now, but James Hoffman did a video of specialty instant coffee, and he mentioned this business right here. And I actually ordered from it because I was very curious for anytime I went to Las Vegas. For anybody that's been to Las Vegas, you know that the coffee there can be rough, especially at this time. This is also before I think Luminous existed. So it was really hard to find anything that was passable. And I did purchase some of their specialty instant coffees. As you can see, they were working with some really notable coffee roasters too. So you had the Barn, you had, what was that up there? Equator. And I loved the idea and concept behind this. I do hope that maybe somebody else picks up this idea and concept in the future and does it, works with these higher end coffee roasters to do instant coffee collabs, because I can see this working out well. Maybe they were a little bit ahead of the time where there weren't enough people interested in this specific product, but I do think it's a very valuable and useful product to have. I tried out some of them and they were better than I was probably expecting at the time. I don't know who else is offering instant coffee though. It looks like we have Blue Bottle here that seems to have quite a few. Has anybody actually had Blue Bottle's instant coffees? Oh, this is obnoxious. We could also do this as a theme. I'm just kind of floating this out there as we're going through it. Nobody really suggests it, but for a while I've been wanting to do a theme between the 4 pioneers of American coffee roasters. So Stumptown Intelligentsia, Counterculture, and Blue Bottle. I do not like Blue Bottle's website at all. Is this just all of their instant coffees? That is impressive how many instant coffees they have. Wow. They really seem to have invested pretty heavily into that, didn't they? My frustration with them is that they seem to have completely disregarded their single origin offerings because we have one single origin offering right now. Come on, Blue Bottle. Let's see here. A couple of new coffee shops opened in Denver if you're visiting soon. Yeah, I am visiting soon, so hopefully I'll get an opportunity to try out some of those coffees here soon. Stefan Hems said, off topic, but I remember you saying there was a natural Mejorado from H&S that you didn't try last year. Is it the La Papaya natural Mejorado they just released? No. What was that one called? I think it was called La Reserva, if I remember correctly. Different coffee. I did speak to, my S is still not working. I did speak to the owner of H&S about how it compares to the Mejorado this year, and they said that the Mejorado might be a little bit more intense, but also in a good way. Not that one. It was in Ecuador Mejorado. I don't think that they still have it on their website. This is the one. Yes, La Reserva Zamora. Yeah, that was the one. So different Mejorado coffee. For anybody that is interested, we did purchase that coffee from H&S too. The natural Mejorado that they just released. I don't think that will come as a surprise to anyone. Yep, this coffee right here. And since we released what we purchased anyway, the other coffee that we added alongside this one was the Kenyan that they also just released. This Kenyan coffee. Okay, let's go back to what we were looking at here. And then, so specialty instant coffees, why don't we go back to Blue Bottle actually? I'm just gonna do this real quick. I might ask around. I'm curious what you guys think, but we could definitely do an instant coffee theme at some point if you guys are interested in that. I'm sure a lot of you guys probably remember when Blue Bottle wasn't this big. I do remember going to California and seeing quite a few Blue Bottles there, but even then it wasn't to the extent that they are now. In fact, you can go into grocery stores and see their coffee. Pretty much every single grocery store is kind of insane. The fact that there are so many of them in Japan is also kind of weird. All right, Gideon says La Cabra's El Trapelgesha is really nice. Yeah, we have not had La Cabra in a while. It might be nice if we were doing a theme to add a European coffee roaster at least. I think the issue with La Cabra is once upon a time there used to be a lot of multi-roasters nearby that carried their coffee, but I see it less and less these days. I think a lot of people haven't necessarily had the best results with their coffees, us included. Bella. Antonio Medina. I'm wondering if it's not available in the US market, that it might just be a European release. I think I did see it on the European side of things. Never tried suggestion port 2050. Yeah, we'll definitely take a look at that one here. I'm gonna see if I can find that La Cabra coffee first real quick. Actually, see if it'll let me look at it from the European side of things. So yeah, here it is on the European side. It apparently isn't released on the American side. Red ripe grapes. Okay. I have to say, one of the most important things any coffee roaster or website should have is the processing of a coffee. And I think the last time I looked at La Cabra's website, I was kind of frustrated that I couldn't find the process. There it is, a washed geisha. Scroll all the way down to find out that it's a wash processed coffee with those grape notes. So it probably is at least slightly heavy. I can't imagine it's the cleanest out there. All right, let's take a look at Port 2050. What's the details of Port 2050, Nathan? I'm kind of curious about that. It looks like pretty straightforward offerings right here. Ethiopian whoosh whoosh, a Burundi geisha. Is that a geisha? All right, never mind. Man, if I'd have seen a Burundi geisha, that would have immediately caught my interest. Pretty straightforward, you know, your mixed blend with a Catamore Peruvian coffee, a whoosh whoosh Ethiopia, which is a little different than a field blend Kenyan coffee. If we do decide to go with that theme, then I'll go ahead and write them down. This was just suggested to us, so I really know nothing at all about this coffee roaster. I'd probably go with the whoosh whoosh. Definitely the most interesting coffee on that list. HJ says, I saw El Turpial, that's how you probably say it, when I went to La Cabra's store in Soho on Friday. I'm guessing you didn't try it. Testing 112 said, speaking of a European, I haven't heard much buzz about fried hats lately. Why don't we take a very quick look at their website? We've made little progress in terms of figuring out a coffee, so we'll go ahead and just continue looking. I am working on one of Fried Hat's coffees currently. Yes, I picked it up from a coffee shop because I was thinking whether or not Airworks had brought them in recently. But I did find one that sounded nice, and I'm hoping that they still have it. It was just a standard Peruvian coffee, honestly. This one, the Cruz Pata. So we're working on the Cruz Pata. They added as a filter offering. If I understand correctly, I think that their higher end offerings are Omni Roast only and their standard offerings are filter. But as you can see, this one sounded very much like my type of coffee. I've had one cup of it so far. It was better than I was expecting. So I do think that Fried Hats is definitely still capable of doing some really nice coffees. They still roast on the Probat, if I remember correctly. I could have that completely wrong, but I could have sworn that at least once upon a time they were roasting on the Probat. We reviewed this coffee too in the past. I think it was just okay. They offered a lot of Colombian coffees, and from what I remember of them when we first started reviewing them, they've added significantly more experimental out there and processed coffees, but they have a really good selection list right now. As the higher end offerings, for the most part, seem to be omni roasted. Their Kenyan coffees are also very Kenyan-like. Have you tried Lucky Cat coffee from Germany and Coco from, how do you say that, Stavanger, Norway? That's kind of interesting that I've never heard of the Norwegian coffee roaster because we usually have a pretty good idea of those Norwegian coffee roasters, but we'll take a very quick look at Lucky Cat. Never heard of Lucky Cat coffee. Same thing though, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have a European coffee roaster as an offering. Now, the website's going to be a little slow on me. There we go. Okay. That a pure SL34. Okay. That's already going to catch my interest. And then we have more Ethiopian whoosh whoosh. I guess we're finally getting to the time when Ethiopian whoosh whoosh coffees are much more abundant and available. I saw the SL14, so I assumed that had to be a Ugandan coffee. I love reviewing just straight SL28, SL34, even Riru and Batian coffees. Much more enjoyable than when it's some sort of field blend. What are the details of this coffee roaster? A lot of the German coffee roasters we've reviewed recently have been more developed than I was expecting. So Leuchtfeuer, the recent reviews we've had of them. What was the other one that's pretty popular? Not the barn. We don't review the barn, but a lot of them just seem to be slightly more developed. I'm going to write them down just in case. That'd be the Kenya. It's a nice sounding Kenya. Kokio is newish. That would make a lot of sense. Is that spelled right? Oh, it's hard to read the comments sometimes. Coco. Okay. There we go. For the most part, pretty straightforward offerings. It looks like. I assume that they're probably at least a little lighter in general. Costa Rican coffee. Yeah, very straightforward offerings. I think if there's one that might interest me the most, obviously I would order maybe the natural Ethiopia. I assume that one of them is natural. We have not reviewed many Costa Rican coffees this year, so that's probably what I'd be most interested in. It's a very interesting varietal mix. Not the most exciting sounding offerings, but new coffee roaster nonetheless. Neil says there's a Finca Soledad Sidra by 3 Marks from Barcelona, which looks pretty interesting. So yeah, we'll take a look at them real quick. We have reviewed a couple of coffees from 3 Marks. Haven't had the best results with them so far. Also not the biggest fan of Sidra coffees, but it's always worth checking out and seeing about potentially revisiting and trying something else from them. I think it was just a regular old Ethiopian coffee too. Hoping the internet's not having issues. The stream's still going, so I don't imagine that it is, but 3 Marks website doesn't want to work for me right now. Well, if anybody else wants to check to see if the 3 Marks website is working for them, it does not want to work for me right now. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Okay, next suggestion we got was from Midnight Salsa. They said, how about Kenyan coffees? A lot of them dropping right now. So many sound so good. And that's one of the other directions I was considering going. And when I saw that Kenyan coffee, I immediately wrote it down. So we could do Kenyan coffees. We did Ethiopian coffees last month. And I do think we're seeing a lot of Kenyan coffees. I can imagine that a lot of you guys either have a Kenyan coffee that you're enjoying, a Kenyan coffee that you've been interested in, and it would be very easy to find a bunch of Kenyan coffees from a bunch of different coffee roasters. So that's definitely a possibility for a theme. So if you guys have a Kenyan coffee that you're either interested in, working on, or really like, then just go ahead and let us know. Aaron says, Kenya shoebox. Yes, but we can't do shoebox because we've already had shoebox as one of our coffee of the months recently, actually. Aaron says, missed most of the stream. What was the theme? We're still kind of working on that, toying between a couple of theme ideas. It seems like the Kenyan theme is actually really popular with a lot of people, so we might change it up and do a Kenyan theme. The other thing we were loosely thinking of was coffee roasters that we had never reviewed before because we had had some suggestions of coffee roasters that we'd never had before. So those are the main things that we're probably thinking right now. Connor suggested both Vibrant and Pilgrim out of Philly are roasters that you've had decent success with. I have not heard from Vibrant in a very long time, actually. I know that they're extremely active on Reddit, or at least once upon a time they were extremely active on Reddit. I don't want to get political or controversial in any sense whatsoever. I have not heard the best things about the business, and it's, obviously secondhand information, so I don't really want to get involved in that, but we did review them once a very, very long time ago. It was the Edwin Narenya coffee. I think it was an Edwin Narenya coffee, but it was one of those coffees that tasted very much like a hopsy IPA sort of experience, which unsurprisingly I didn't have the best results with. It was the first one that really tasted like that we had ever reviewed. But yeah, we have a Kenyan coffee if we were to go with the Kenyan theme. I don't know based off of it's one of those things where it's just better not to go in one direction or another with a coffee roaster that has been a little controversial. So even though they might have some interesting sounding coffees, I mean, they have Luna right here. I think that probably just not the best idea to review them. The other one, though, we've heard a lot of positive things about, which is Pilgrim. So we'll take a look at Pilgrim real quick. Connor figures they would try something else other than Poem. Well, you know, always worth branching out. We branch out perhaps a little too much at times. All right, let's see what Pilgrim's offering. No Kenyan coffees, unfortunately. Rigoberto Sanchez, and a Gesha, Costa Rican Gesha. That would be interesting. If we could fit into theme, that would fit into our coffee roasters we'd never reviewed before theme. A little expensive, but that's okay. And in Arturo Paz, or in Arturo Paz Pacamara. So that has to be a Honduran coffee. Interesting. I'll write them down. What would you guys prefer? What are you thinking? Are you thinking the new coffee roasters or are you thinking the Kenyan theme? Obviously, if we could combine the two and do a new coffee roasters and Kenyan theme, that would be ideal. But I'm just kind of curious to hear what you guys might think. Nathan said, Ports 2050 is local to me in Minnesota, just started up. He's come to a couple of meetups. He's tight with the guys at SK. I had his Peru and really liked it. I believe he's on a small air roaster. I like SK. I've had very limited offerings from them, but what I've had have been actually pretty nice. So that's good to hear. Nice to see that the Minnesota coffee scene is improving. Though last time I was in Minnesota, the coffee scene wasn't that bad. There were a number of multi roasters that were carrying some decent coffee roasters out there. So it was better than a lot of other coffee cities I've been to. They have a Las Lajas Natural, so I feel like you should snag it, you know. Yeah, Connor, it has been far too long since we've had a Las Lajas Natural coffee. I think the people want to see it too, given just how much we love those Las Lajas Natural coffees. Let's see here. Have you reviewed Sweven? They have a nice washed and proving Gesha at the moment. We have reviewed Sweven, and funny enough, Gideon, we do have a Sweven review coming up. I recorded it very recently too, so it should be out either this upcoming week or at the very latest the week after. But we'll take a look at their offerings too. I've seen them at a couple of coffee shops, usually in Canada, but they do tend to lean a little heavily into the more processed coffees. I've always been interested in this Batian, even though I think it is a natural. Not that any coffee roaster, natural, carbonic macerated. Not that any coffee roaster ever takes my suggestion on website design, but having these really large headers is really distracting at times, and it blocks off a lot of important information. So that's just my thoughts. Yeah, here you go, that natural Peruvian Gesha. Probably a little heavy, but other than that, sounds nice. That experience that we have from Sweven is better than a lot of the other experiences we had had from them in the past. So I do think that they are improving. I think that they're one of the better English-based coffee roasters. And they always have interesting offerings at the very least. I feel like if I lived in England, the two coffee roasters that I would always have my eye on are Sweven and what's the Scenery. Those are the two that seem to be the most interesting. All right, let's see here. Stannis said, Good Brothers Coffee released a Kenyan coffee, the Nyeri. Haven't tried it yet. All right, let's take a look. Good Brothers. I don't think they're a coffee roaster that I'm familiar with. Yeah, they don't look familiar to me. Am I looking at the right website? Because I imagine I'm not, given that they do not have anything apparently. There we go. Never mind, I am. Guessing it's our pretty straightforward Kenyan. We might have not seeing the varietal mix, but I do assume it's some sort of field blend probably. I'll throw them into our potential new roasters here. It kind of fits both themes. What's the details of this coffee roaster actually? It could just be the website. Websites can be deceiving, so even though it may not necessarily be the best looking website, kind of curious what the profile of their coffees would be. SK dropped Ehon. Really? That's crazy. I'm not joking. That's actually kind of wild. I usually when I think of coffee roasters that remind me of maybe those late 2000s sort of theme. It's strange to me that they would ever drop a wow, look at that. That they would ever drop a extremely modern coffee. And I'm not saying SK's, late 2010s, early 2020s sort of thing, but that's kind of the profile and the vibe that I get from their coffees. That's why it's so strange to see them offering this coffee. That is strange. It's cool. I would love to try it. It's just a little strange. Man, I really should find a way to try this coffee. I'm extremely curious now. Do you know off the top of your head, I'm curious, do you remember what SK is roasting on? Because I think that this coffee has some pretty decent potential. Wow, SK has some interesting offerings. Good for SK. Whoever's doing their sourcing is doing a good job. So if the person from SK ever watches this and the person doing the sourcing is great. All right, Simon says, what about exposure therapy Kenya? Airworks has it. Here's what I said about exposure therapy, and I'm curious to see how this is going to work out. I reached out to Airworks and I said, whatever the two most popular coffees that you have are, I would like both of those. So I'm hoping that that is one of those Kenyan coffees. I really have no idea which coffees we're going to end up with from exposure therapy, but I'm curious about that. And what are your favorite coffee roasters in Shanghai? I'm a big fan of your channel. I appreciate that. Let me take a look. I do not know any Chinese, so I do not know what your name is. I know actually very little Chinese, but let me pull up the Shanghai coffee roasters. Yeah, we got Terraform and Big Sur are the two that we've reviewed. Big Sur is not just my favorite Shanghai-based coffee roaster. They're my favorite Chinese-based coffee roaster as of right now, I would have to say. I've had really nice success with the vast majority of their coffees. I've had the highest hit rate out of any Chinese-based coffee roasters' coffees. So I can go on record right now and say, at least as of this moment, that Big Sur is my favorite Shanghai-based Chinese coffee roaster. Good Brothers is the Hoon Hypes Up. Okay, that explains that one right there. It might be worth seeing what Hoon has to say about that. I talked with Hoon once upon a time, a very, very long time ago, but it's been a very long time since we've last communicated. Gideon says, if you're going with a new roaster theme, I'm all in for a Maze Lab review. We will have a lot of Maze Lab coming up, so you don't need to worry about Maze Lab. I placed a pretty significant order with Maze Lab via Airworks. I want to say it's either 5 or 6 coffees. If everything goes well and goes right, then I should be doing a blind taste test on Maze Lab as kind of a first reaction to their coffee. So there will be more than enough Maze Lab for anyone to handle. 7ORX asked, just joined, what's the theme? And I think Nathan's not quite. So the theme is that we're looking at two things, either Kenyan coffees, because there are quite a few interesting sounding Kenyan coffees, or the other one is first time trying out a new coffee roaster, so one that we've never reviewed before. We've had some options on that too. But yeah, Nathan was saying they have a new roaster. He's going lighter, and they are on a San Franciscan. That explains so much, Nathan, and that's ideal. I love the San Franciscan. There are very few coffee roasters these days that are still roasting on the San Franciscan, so I'd be very interested to try out some of those coffees. It's 11, we're 1 hour in, and we've made very little progress into figuring out the coffee. All All right. O Miller says, hopefully he gets you the Getesi Ripper Bone. Yeah, that would be nice. We had, I would say, good success with exposure therapy. So I imagine any of the coffees that was released recently will be pretty nice. I really don't know which one's going to be the best. I'm kind of trusting his judgment on those because all of them sounded nice. Gideon said, "Did you see the Benjamin Potts collab between Brandy or Black and White, Onyx, Proud Mary, and Verve? Was it all four of those? I did see that collab, and there were a lot of jokes about it because a lot of those coffee roasters were extremely popular and successful. I want to say like just before 2020 or so. I was curious about it. Benjamin Potts is amazing. His coffees are truly exceptional. So it sounds lovely, and I would have loved to have tried it. I haven't had great success with most of those coffee roasters recently. Nathan says if you're too backlogged to justify buying the Jose from SK, I'll send you a sample. If you got it, I would love a sample. And I'm definitely backlogged. We've had to postpone starting the Cito coffees because I'm currently on a 7 to 8 coffee per day, day. So we've just finished enough coffees to start working on those Cito coffees. But even then, we have stuff coming up like some of the Datura coffees that we had ordered from Airworks recently to start working on too. So as of right now, I'm a little bit backed up in terms of adding too many new things. Van Nguyen says Offshoot Coffee in Australia has Hachi, Panamanian, non-Gesha. All right, let's take a look. My S key's still not working. There you go. And they're roasting on the Loring. I greatly appreciate you guys for posting right on the front page that that's the machine that you're using. All right. El Encanto, Sidra. If you have a Panamanian Hachi, I don't know why you wouldn't make that the very first coffee that you put on your website. They do have pretty unique and interesting offerings. I am not seeing that. If I'm not looking at the right website, then let me know, but I do not see that specific coffee unless it's under some special. I don't see it. Sounded really interesting, but I do not see it as of this moment. Let's see here. Oh, I missed that. Yeah, Salami says, good Kenyans have been coming through, say. Yes, actually. If they still have them on their website, I'm curious. I will say this about the Say Kenyans. We purchased this one. We were going to ask Airworks to split both of the Kenyans that they released this past week, and one of the other ones sold out. So that I think it was just a straight SL28. That one sold out before we had the opportunity to discuss it with Airworks. We actually both agreed on it, and we looked at the website and saw that it was completely gone. But we did purchase this Kenyan coffee largely due to all of the positive things that were said about it. They said it's one of the best Kenyan coffees that the Bature family has. Like everyone was hyping and suggesting this coffee. So we ordered this one. We're going to be splitting it with Airworks. If anybody has the other coffee that was released, we're trying to, or if anyone knows where to get it, because me and Airworks are both going to be hunting for that other Kenyan coffee because we want to split that one and I want to review that one as well. So we'll be working on those. And for anybody that's late, the coffee that I'm actually drinking is the, what was it called? It's the Kenyan coffee that everyone's been hyping about from Say that they also released recently. They have released a lot of Kenyans recently. It's still very nice, actually. I think it's better than I was initially saying. Let's see here. So, oh, Van Nguyen says it's an espresso roast. They espresso roasted a Hachi coffee? Okay, well, that happens. I thought the stream froze for a second. Okay, Salami says, Say as a Kenyan competition winner. Yeah, I think that's the one we were looking at. So, yeah, we purchased that one, which is pretty cool. IDK, if you've ever reviewed them before, but Cloak Black Coffee has 3 Kenyans at the moment. Yeah, let's take a look at them. It's starting to seem like the Kenyan theme is where people are leaning towards. Remind me again where Code Black are from. I know I've looked at their website before. I just can't remember where. Of course, the Bolivian coffees are sold out. I'm not seeing any Kenyan offerings currently. Ah, here we go. AB filter. Would probably have to sort. Oh, and eat natural Kenyan coffee. Melbourne. I wonder what the shipping for Code Black is. Now that you mention it, I do think that they're on our suggestion recommendation list. I'm thinking the Kenyan theme might be the direction that we go with this. Okay, we still have quite a few comments to get through, so let me try to get through those real quick. We do have some pretty interesting ones too for the comments. But HJ Wong suggested Intelligentsia Gori Gesha, so we'll take a look at that one real quick. I'll just pull up their website here. I have a Kenyan coffee if we wanted to go that direction. I keep saying about these headers and everything, it's a little tricky to navigate at times. Gori Gesha Natural, there we go. You know, interestingly enough, we've never reviewed anything from Intelligentsia, so if we were still going with that theme, they actually fit a number of themes. My thinking is, let's just combine the two themes, mostly because we found enough interesting sounding Kenyan coffees to make that the theme. So we'll just do new coffee roasters, Kenyan coffees from new coffee roasters that we'd never reviewed before. So now it's just a matter of finding them. This Gori Gesha sounds a little heavy. We have the lychee. I do kind of wonder about it in general, but funny enough, I should be in Chicago soon, so I will probably get a chance to try their coffee and shop. This is a coffee I'd be way more interested in. Caballero Gesha. Very commonly found coffee from Tim Wendelboe, but that's pretty cool. Okay. Control F. That would probably be a good idea to use. Okay. Let's see what else we've got here. Okay, rest of the suggestions. Neil HNS said, would love to see some April coffee roasters again. We do have an order placed with Airworks for April, so that should be coming up here soon. We'll have more April reviews. I'm going to see if I remember which coffees we did end up purchasing from April. I don't remember off the top of my head. We place orders for a lot of coffees, and when they arrive, I'm like, oh yeah, cool, I ordered that one. It wasn't one of the higher end coffees. I think it might have been one of the Guatemalan coffees. But yes, we will be having more April reviews coming up here. I think since we're running a little long, I'm going to try to go through these a little quicker. Nigarthi said, coffees that describe their taste, Negroni. And I do believe that's a cocktail. I've only ever seen one, and I tried to look this up beforehand because this was one of the comments I saw where I said, I'll probably need to do some background research. I couldn't find any other coffees that do have that specific note listed on there. The only one that I remember was the gochujang coffee from H&S that we reviewed last year. That one had that specific note on there, but yeah, if there are any others that do have that note, especially a Kenyan coffee, which could be possible, then that would be a good fit, but I couldn't find any other ones like that. This is kind of an interesting one. Asa Rear one suggested a new Japanese-based coffee roaster called Walnut Coffee Roasters. And the founder of Walnut Coffee Roasters is a former employee of Apollon's Gold. So I have purposely not looked at their website yet, and I'm curious. My S is still not working. There we go. To see what their website looks like. Yeah, this is the one, Walnuts Coffee. I remember Kofea said a Swedish roaster will have their Kenyan estate green by them. I forgot what their name was, so let me check in case you don't know. That'd be great. If you can find that out, I would absolutely love to know. I would love to try Kofea Circular's Kenyan coffees from a different roaster. We had that blind taste test video very recently, and I have to say that Ruby Batian since then has been out there. And we have a lot of out there coffees, but even in comparison to a lot of the ones that we've had that have been out there, that one is one of the most out there coffees ever. All right. So moderately straightforward. We do have a Chiroso, we do have a Gesha, and we do have an Ethiopian coffee. But if we had a Kenyan coffee, I would definitely love to add them to the list. We do need to do an Asian coffee of the month theme at some point, and whenever we do, I want to feature them. I'm very curious to try out their coffees and learn more about them. I assume that this is the right business. Yeah, interesting. Okay. And a couple more here real quick. That's a very interesting suggestion, by the way. I would love to try some coffees from them. Magnuson said underrepresented varietals like Excelsa, Liberica, Robusta, etc., but well selected roasted. I was purposely looking for some of those while we were going through this stream because I wanted to see if maybe some of the more notable coffee roasters that we looked through had something like that. Hydrangea buys interesting green a lot of the time, so I think that I've seen stuff like that from them in the past. I don't think that they have anything currently. They would be my pick of the bunch to get it from. I'm still extremely curious in this coffee. If I can find something to add to this coffee as an order, then I would probably purchase from Hydrangea soon. The rest of the offerings, a little less interested in. But I didn't find anything that stood out too much. You probably noticed during the stream I was pointing out the varietals of certain coffees that I thought might have some connection to that, but I didn't see too many of them. C. Nomi suggested Geshas, and I still go back to that. I do wonder from you guys if Gesha's higher end coffees would be a good theme in the future because I know that they can be expensive. That Benjamin, or which one was it? The Caballero Gesha from Intelligentsia was a very good pick for that. I think we've seen a number of other ones. It might be better to hold off on the Gesha's theme for another couple of months until a lot of these coffee roasters are releasing the high scoring, high end Panamanian Geshas. So that's something that we will look for in the future. Vodka Bath suggested coffees roasted at origin. And the ones that always come to mind are Instinto from Ecuador. But outside of that, I think TNT is the only other one that I know of off the top of my head that is roasted at origin because they're kind of both. They're kind of a Instinto. I think that they're a coffee roaster and a producer in some capacity. And I still don't even know if Pepe is shipping coffees to the United States yet. He says that if I ever need to, then I can purchase them from him and he'll ship them to the United States. But I do want others to also get access to those coffees as well. Outside of that, if people do have coffees roasted at origin, I would love to see those. I think it's a great idea. Would love to give the producers credit for their work as well. And then the last suggestion we got was Apollon's Gold. So we'll take a very quick look at Apollon's Gold. And while I'm pulling that up, we'll take a look at some comments because we got some comments here. Let's see here. Check out Slow Coffee in New Zealand. I believe they roast on a Loring. Native roasts at origin. Real quick on that, Vanduin, before I take a look at Slow Coffee, do they actually roast at origin or are they roasting in Dallas? Because I know that their business is based out of Dallas. So I don't know what is the case, if it's roasted in Colombia or if they roast it in Dallas. I guess technically it's the producer roasting their own coffee in the same way that the Savage coffees are. But I think it's the same thing with Savage. I think that Savage roasts in Florida, but they're obviously based out of Panama. Can we get a review of the 30K Esmeraldas? Connor, I would love to do that. If I jokingly said this is a joke, I would never actually do that. But I said, if any coffee roaster wants to send me that coffee, they will automatically go in our world-class tier list. They won't, but I would so much love to try those 30K Esmeralda coffees so much. That sounds amazing. Okay, Apollon's Gold real quick. Haven't had the best success with them recently, but they still do have interesting coffees. Their coffees have also been a little bit more expensive than they used to be in the past, but I mean, coffee in general has increased in price. This would be the coffee that interests me the most, real quick, from what I've seen so far. Churroso sounds interesting. I don't know what success others have had with Apollon's Gold recently. I've actually heard moderately mixed things. I've heard some positive feedback. I've heard some not so great feedback, but the last set of coffees we had from them wasn't our favorites. This would be a coffee I'd love to review, though. Let's see here. Diferente roasts in origin in Colombia. Perfect. I would love to take a look at that one here real quick. So we'll first start out with Slow Day Coffee. Apollon's Gold, I like the way they've changed up their website a bit. I do like the offerings that they do have. I wonder if it's worth maybe placing an order from them in the future at some point. Let's see here. My S key loves being inconsistent today. I have looked at their website before. I'm trying to remember where. An Indonesian coffee, quite a few Indonesian coffees. Doesn't look like we have a Kenyan coffee at this moment. It's always surprising to me when a coffee roaster isn't offering at least one Kenyan. It seems to be a mainstay for a lot of coffee roasters. So it wouldn't fit with our theme, but a lot of unique coffees. Indonesian coffees, obviously, don't love the cherry wine note on there, but same thing with Australian and New Zealand-based coffee roasters. I would love to review more of those. If there was a way for me to do like an entire month's worth of reviews of just New Zealand and Australian-based coffee roasters, that would be ideal. Our New Zealand and Australian subscribers are so much fun. They're such wonderful people. So if I can make that happen, that's a bit of a goal of mine. I would love to actually do an entire review series in Australia, even though I've heard that the Australian coffee scene isn't necessarily the best. Let's see here. Aaron, coffee of the month, top 5 to 10 best of Panama. The dream, would love it. Everyone knows that I would absolutely love to do that if that was possible. I think a lot of people know that if it was up to me, well, I guess it's technically up to me, but if I was only reviewing coffees that I enjoyed, probably and Panamanian geishas and Mehar coffees, all of which washed, maybe sprinkle in a very nice sounding natural Ethiopia here or there, but for the most part, best of Panama Panamanian coffees, that sounds like a dream. Okay, let's take a look at Diferente, Colombia. I hope I spelled that right. There we go. My Spanish isn't the worst, so I can translate it to English anyway, I suppose. This is still a great theme and a great idea. And a lot of these roasted at origin producers do need more notoriety. So I would love to have some of these featured in the future. Only kind of concerning thing is the amount of more processed Colombian coffees. But this right here, if I was reviewing one from them right now, this is the one that catches my interest the most. Sounds wonderful. Know nothing about the profile of it, but it just being an SL28 washed Colombian coffee sounds really fun. So good suggestion. I appreciate that suggestion. I've had some natives wash geishas in store and they were super pretty. How are they actually? I'm still curious about them in general. I've heard native can be a little bit more developed, but at the same time, slightly mixed responses about them so far. So we really should try them for ourselves at some point. My battery on my computer is a little low, by the way, so it's going to be one of two things. I'm either going to need to plug it in, or it's going to actually just shut down on us midstream. Every time we put them in the Coffee of the Month poll, they have not won. They've had some really interesting coffees. They've had Mehar coffees. They've had washed Mehar coffees that I really wanted to try. And I probably should have just purchased them, if I'm being completely honest, but missed out on that opportunity. And every time we go back to them, I realize just how much I'm frustrated by their website because of how small everything is on the website. And how hard it is to read with the background. What is this coffee? Is it, because it says the producer is Alan Hartman, so is it grown in Panama? I imagine it's still probably grown in Colombia. Sounds very nice. I'd be interested in that coffee too. Eternal coffee from New Zealand, no Kenyas though. That's unfortunate. Would have been a nice one to fit into the theme. The other thing about Australian and New Zealand-based coffee roasters is that we do need to be sure that they will ship to the United States. And if not, then I already see Aaron mentioning Airworks. Always bother Airworks. I always tell people to please bother Airworks because Airworks has ability to bring in coffee roasters from all over the world. And if Airworks is ever bringing in a coffee roaster, we will review that coffee roaster. So this is a PSA to anyone. Please go bother Airworks as much as humanly possible. He loves being bothered too. All right. But yeah, since he's working with Current Coffee, I'd love to see the Aku Philippine Gesha roasted by them, reviewed by you. I don't think I've looked at their offerings, truth be told. So send me a message and I will be sure to ask Airworks for that coffee specifically. I don't know how much it is either, but it sounds nice. Filipino Gesha, pretty interesting there. Keen Coffee out of Utrecht, if I said that correct, has a nice Kenyan coffee and a Costa Rican Gesha. I should kind of do a recap of what we do actually have for the coffees so far suggested to us. I know there was the SL34 that we saw early on. Yeah, a Kamwenja. I know I've seen some of the subscription services offering Keen in the past. I think if I remember correctly, Coco had that Kenya. So I think if I'm looking at things, we have the Coco Kenya, the Intelligentsia Kenya, the Keen Kenya, and then there was some other options like Little Bear and I know Lucky Cat also had one, but I think that there was another Kenyan I saw from a different coffee roaster that also sounded pretty interesting. Let's see here. The owner, head roaster of Differente, learned to roast from the head roaster of Idle Hands. Interesting. So they roast more American light medium. That's really good information. I do appreciate that. I've only had a couple of experiences with Idle Hands, but from everything I hear from people in Utah, Idle Hands seems to be the most popular coffee roaster out there. A lot of positive things have been said to us about that coffee roaster. Everyone throw in $1 and we can collectively afford a single cup. Yeah, that would be nice. Prodigal has 2 Kenyans available right now with one already sold out. A third already sold out. Take a look at Prodigal. One thing that's always bothered me about Prodigal is the types of coffees they're able to get that others don't have, because I've really wanted to try some of the coffees where they roasted by a different coffee roaster and they have that heading thing. But we'll take a look at those Kenyan coffees. We have reviewed Prodigal in the past, so they wouldn't fit the theme for this month, but I'm still kind of curious. Yeah, they really have interesting coffees. I've never seen this Bourbon Aki from anyone else. Their header is driving me crazy. Is this some mix? A blend? Interesting. I'm really sidetracked by their coffees. Jesse, check out my Gesha again. Oh, yeah. We'll take a look at it. I was actually taking a look at it this morning. I was curious to see if you had released anything else since last time. I love how our Wilton Benitez review, if you Google Rising Coffee, our Wilton Benitez review shows up on your page right there. That's kind of funny. It sounds like a nice coffee. It really does. I'm still wondering when you're going to release a wash process coffee, but this one still sounds pretty nice. I do like the Hartman coffees. I've been drinking the Hartman coffees for a very, very, very long time. And then Stefan says, agree, Native's website is heinous in store, had Hatchi, Kondoru in store. And at least that one was on the much lighter end, super clean melon notes that I don't normally get when listed. I'm wondering and kind of hoping that Native is starting to roast a little lighter, because the biggest critique I've heard about them so far is that their coffees aren't the lightest out there. And it seems like there's a lot of experimentation going on right now with the work that Diego Bermudez is doing. And I do think that he will land on some success with whichever Hatchie coffees they do choose to promote. That's also a little bit of the feedback I've heard, because in the same way that Letty and the original Diego Bermudez release were kind of the prize releases from his original experimentation, I imagine that's probably going to happen with Hatchie, that he's going to settle on a couple of these being the best success he has, and those are the ones that will be extremely popular, and we'll see with a lot of coffee roasters going forward. But they're one that we at some point will need to just finally purchase from Native. And I'm hoping it comes at a time when they have really interesting coffees and people are really happy with the way that they're roasting their coffees. Okay, we've gone about 30 minutes over. I will stay for just a couple more minutes here and maybe go through this list real quick to see what we've figured out and what we want to do as our Kenyans. I'm pretty set on the Intelligentsia, the Keen, and the Coco being 3 of them. We could go all the way up to 8, do 1 runoff, and then potentially just pick 1 more coffee if there's one other one that sounds interesting. But I'll run through real quick the other coffees and coffee roasters I have written down. I know we're not doing the Hex Coffee. I don't think that they had a Kenyan one on there, which is unfortunate. That Tanzania does sound very nice. I don't think Newberry Street had a... Still not, is it Newberry Street? I think it's with an E, yeah. I don't think that they had a Kenyan coffee, so I don't think that they were on there. No, because they were mostly these more out there processed coffees. And then we also have a Little Bear coffee written down. Established 2018. That explains why I've never been there. Their coffee shop is newer than the most recent time I've been to Albuquerque. No, actually, I was in Albuquerque in 2020. I guess I just didn't know about their coffee shop. Washed Bali, Natural Ethiopia, Washed Ethiopia, Washed Rwanda. They have a lot of coffees. No Kenyan coffee, though. Ports 2050. I know we decided on the whoosh whoosh if we were going to pick a coffee from them. Ah, yes, they do have a Kenya. So that's a possibility. Lucky Cat. I think that was one of the first ones that we decided on in Kenya from. That can't be it. I do not think that is the... That's not the right one. I'll need to find that one again. Pilgrim Code Black. Yeah, the battery is about to die. Okay, I will find a final Kenyan, but for right now, that's going to be our theme. We're going to be doing Kenyan coffees from coffee roasters that we have never reviewed before. So I'm going to end the stream right there. My battery is, I want to say at like 3% or so. So I'll go ahead and end this stream right here. So thank you everyone for participating, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.